Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on creating a university angel group to fund your student, faculty, researcher, and alumni startups. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. This webinar is co-organized with Kent State University's College of Business Administration. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that we have an upcoming event on October 16 and 17. It's the third University Startups Demo Day, and the program highlights three main events. One is the University Startups Demo Day itself. The second is the IP to Startup program, and the third is the Investor Roadshow. In item number 3, we'll talk a little bit more about the American Chinese University Growth Fund and how it can coincide with the University Angel Group that we're proposing that you form in your university if you're interested. So before we move forward, we will have Q&A at the end of the session. So to ask questions, all you need to do is type in the question in the questions box of your webinar control panel, and we'll queue them up at the end of the presentation today. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can, but if we don't get to your questions, we'll have an email address in the chat box where you could forward your questions after the webinar. The webinar will be recorded and the slides will be available 24 to 48 hours after the webinar concludes. If you'd like to see other videos or other webinars that we've done in the past, please go to our YouTube channel at NCET2.org/YouTube so you can subscribe and get updates if we have new uploads available for you to watch. Before we begin the session, again, we'd like to remind the universities on the call that if you're interested in sending your startups and IP to the next University Startups Demo Day, the first deadline is on July 14th, and we do encourage everyone to submit early in order for us to provide, more feedback, corrections, as well as, get your startups in front of the corporates much earlier, way before the deadline. All right. So for the upcoming webinars in our broadcast schedule, next week, actually tomorrow, we'll have a corporate broadcast series which is entitled Developing Your IP and Startups Through Corporate Strategic Alliances. And tomorrow we'll be featuring Eli Lilly and Company, and the next week on Monday, PepsiCo, and we have several broadcasts happening throughout July, as well as a few broadcasts scheduled in August. So we hope you can join us tomorrow and on Monday to know what the corporates are looking for in terms of startups and IP. Okay, so I'll now go into today's presentation by introducing our panel today. So we have two speakers. Our first speaker is the Executive Director of the National Council of Entrepreneurial Tech Transfer, Tony Stenko, and joining him this afternoon is a member of our Leadership Council. He's a Bridgestone Professor of International Marketing, and he's also the Associate Dean of Graduate and International Programs in the College of Business of Kent State University, Dr. Bob Hisrick. Okay, so I'll turn it over now to Tony to give us, to start us off today and, to talk about today's agenda.
Okay, thank you very much, Ria. Welcome, everyone. So we have the webinar broken up into 5 parts. So what is angel investing is number 1. What is an angel network versus an angel fund? We're going to talk about university benefits in creating an angel network for their startup ecosystem, and how to set that up, and also how NCET2 can help you with the creation and running your angel network. All right. So what is angel investing and what is an angel investor? So an angel investor is a category defined under the Securities Act by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Not just anyone can be an angel investor. You have to be an accredited investor. And basically it's a person who is wealthy enough to be able to fend for themselves and not need third parties to manage the money. And basically, there's some numerical tests. So if you have a net worth over $1 million, excluding a primary residence, you qualify. Or if you're a person either by yourself or with a spouse that makes $200,000 alone or $300,000 with your spouse over the last couple of years, with the reasonable expectation of the same going forward for at least the next year while you invest. So that's that's the definition of an angel investor and how you kind of get into it. But one of the main drivers is the next slide, which talks about angels, unlike VCs, unlike banks, unlike others, invest their own funds and they make their own investment decisions. That's really the key part of being an angel investor. There's about 200,000 to 300,000 active angel investors. So that's a really good number, and it's there's a lot around your universities, and your universities, especially your successful alums, are just a great source, and others in your area. There's very wealthy people in the U.S., as I'm sure everybody knows, and it's not only that they have to be wealthy, but they have to want to invest in this area. And so when you cut down the number of people that are eligible that could qualify under the SEC definition, you get to about 200,000 to 300,000 active investors that you can try to bring into your network. All right, next slide. So what's the difference between an angel investor and venture capital that's better known and really gets a lot of the press? The dollar amounts, they sometimes are closer, but now they're about 25 billion versus 60 billion. During earlier parts of the decade, it actually was closer. Angels, though, do a lot of the deals, and VCs do a lot of the later deals and just fewer numbers. So angels, 71,000 deals in 2015, and this is some Center of Venture Research data and Money Tree data, and also NVCA and Angel Capital Association data. So 71,000 deals a year, roughly, versus 4,000 deals. Of those, 17,000 plus and 31,000 are in seed and early stage. So you can see a majority of that is this really early gap funding that's needed by these university startups. Whereas for venture capital, it's really the reverse. Most of them are in the later stage, very few in the seed, some in the early stage, but later stage is really where most of the VC money kind of goes into. VCs have about 700,000 firms, whereas angel investors is about, as I mentioned, about 200,000 to 300,000. And in this particular year, they counted about 305. The size of the investment is a lot different. 300,000 average investment per deal versus like 13, 14 million for the VCs. And also, even when they go into early stage and seed, angels are just earlier. Having said all of that, there's still a gap, and we'll get into a little bit later how university mentor angels, what we're proposing here, actually should be a little bit earlier than this and really get into the startup phase and the gap funding. Okay, next slide. So a typical profile for an angel is usually they've been investing for a while. They make a number of investments, and that's really important because these are really risky deals. Most of them fail. Not only most, but the vast majority fail. So you have to have a portfolio to kind of catch the winners and catch the ones that succeed. And the good thing about a portfolio theory that the VCs have discovered and angels are kind of cracking is that the ones that succeed so wildly that they make up for the losers. And a lot of the losers, are kind of complete wipeouts. So a lot of angel investors, if they invest in 10 deals, 9 completely go to zero, but there's one that kind of makes up for all the investments. Number of years as an entrepreneur. So a lot of them are actually ex-entrepreneurs. That's the interesting thing about angel investors. They're angel investors because they've made some money as entrepreneurs, and just like that ecosystem. So the average here under the Kaufman data is about 14.5. Usually they've founded, a couple of startups. So what's really cool about this is some of your university startups that you're helping develop around universities, as they succeed. Obviously, some of them are going to fail, but usually they succeed eventually if they keep trying. And I think the average is six tries to get to a success. Well, after they succeed and they get cashed out, they then become the people that will fund your angel group. So there's a cycle here. Most people don't invest more than 10% of their wealth in angel investing just because it really is very risky in investments. And so you don't want to put, you don't want to put everything in, because if you don't have a good portfolio, you can easily lose it all. Education, I mean, this is usually a pretty educated class of people for various reasons. But these are sophisticated people that know their way around a university and also understand business pretty well. There's other kind of backgrounds, but those I think a lot of them are just very sophisticated business people and well-educated people. All right, next slide. This is a really interesting slide. So if you look at this, you'll see that most of the activity, unlike for the VC investments, are not on the coast. So I think it's like 75% of venture capital VC firm investments are in New York, Boston, and Silicon Valley. So you can see that the angel groups are just much more widely distributed across the country, which is good, because we hear from the corporates that university startups are good pretty well around the country. The difference is ecosystem and availability of funds. So the angels are kind of doing their part by spreading money across the country, usually locally, though some of them will invest further afield. But this is a really good map to bear in mind, and why it's so important when you're trying to create your angel group around a university. All right, next. And in some cases, the angel money is really, in some places, the only money available. All right, so here is the number of investors in a group. So you can kind of get a pretty quick understanding that these groups are not large. They're personal, friendship, social groups. Most of them are less than 100, and the average is more like 50 to 60. And they can be a lot smaller than that too. So, you can have some that are less than 10 people. You can have, some that are in between. There are super angels that are solo investors, very wealthy solo investors that don't join groups. And there are others that are super wealthy but still invest, alone. So for an angel network around the university, obviously you're trying to bring like-minded people together, not the Lone Ranger type of investors. Okay, next. So a lot of groups do less than 10 deals, and this could be a problem if the angels are just in one group, because as I mentioned, to really succeed, you need a portfolio of between 10 and 20 startups to really make sure that you don't lose your money and you kind of come out on top. You got to catch the one big winner in these portfolios. So bear that in mind when you're talking to your potential angel investors and setting up your group. You want them to invest in more rather than less. More in more companies is better than trying to invest a lot in a fewer. Okay, and the last slide I want to touch on before I hand it over to Bob is what's the difference between university angel groups and regular angel groups. So university angels generally are just more hands-on. They are people that are trying to give back to the students in the university, And so come in a little earlier, do more mentoring. Nobody wants to lose their money because this is not part of their philanthropic money. This is money that they're investing, but they just have more of a tolerance for, helping in longer term and other things. Whereas traditional VCs are acting, traditional angels are acting more like VCs and coming in later, and so this gap is basically opening up. So one of the things we're hoping that this webinar will help create is this network of university angels that are really fit in between traditional angels and the SBIR program, and kind of maybe co-invest with the SBIR program, do a little bit more mentoring, and then set it up for regular traditional angels and VCs as as deal flow. All right. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob.
Thanks, Tony. What we want to talk about in our time together is the last parts of the agenda. And to start off with, we want to look at the difference between an angel network versus an angel fund. And on the next slide, you'll see that I basically have set up three basic things we want to think about. One is, what is an angel group? And as Tony talked about, this is a group of accredited individuals, accredited investors who get together. And it can be formalized or informalized in a lot of places in the United States, and particularly overseas. Tony just showed you the percentage of angel groups in the United States, but countries such as the UK, Ireland, Germany, Austria, and even China has a significant angel network system. These groups can form anywhere. So it's a group of accredited investors, and has to be accredited investors in the United States. Now, I'm sure a question you want to think about is, well, how do we identify those? The SEC has made this very easy for you. They have a form which you have each angel that's in your group sign. Once they sign the form, you do not have to do anything more about making sure they're accredited investor. That they have authorized that they are one, and you do not have to verify that. Otherwise, it would get, I think, a lot messier to set up a university angel group, because then you would have to go and verify, and then you got privileged information and all that kind of thing. So it's just a single form they sign, and that's it. That identifies they have sent to you they are a accredited investor. Now, these groups usually take one of two paths. One, they can form an angel fund. Now, an angel fund means that I contribute my money. Let's say the minimum investment is $25,000. And then the fund makes the investment decision. Now, the fund can either make the investment decision in one of two ways. Some funds make the decision by a manager of the fund, and they sometimes have to get votes, sometimes don't, depends on the organization structure of the fund. All this is spelled out in the fund's document. And usually how the funds operate is they take a vote of the members after a presentation to the fund, and yet the members can't decide on whether they want to invest or not. That's the fund's decision. So the majority of the fund, or maybe it's a 60% vote, depending on, again, the wording of the document for the fund, that fund represents the investors, not a one-off investment basis. For example, I started Jumpstart in Cleveland when I was at another university. We started with an $8 million fund. That's like a mini venture capital fund. And in that fund, we had a manager who made the investment decisions. And so that fund now is a $200+ million fund, and not thanks to me, it just grew to that, and is doing extremely well. So that's one type of angel fund. Another type of angel fund, we'll just stay in Ohio, is the North Coast Angel Fund. They're now on their third round of funding. Their funds are generally in the $100 million range, 50 million to 100 million. And how they run their fund is they have meetings once a month, except for the summers. And then they have 2 presentations per meeting. And at the end of the presentations, then they have a vote by the members present, and that says, yes, we want to go forward or not. So that's a different arrangement. So you see, run by a fund manager, basically, so it's just like a venture capital fund, or a fund that you still can't pull out once the vote is taken, then that you're committed, because it's a pool of money, then voted by the members. Now, that kind of fund is harder to set up. There's much more legal documentation. I've been involved with this so many times. And the problem with that fund for a university, at least in my estimation, is there's more possibility for legal liability. And if anything I've learned in my years in education at various institutions around the country is that's something universities definitely want to avoid. So that's the fund. Now, an angel network is altogether different. First of all, the legal liability is almost negligent for the university because each individual angel makes his or her decision on a deal-by-deal basis. So basically what you are is the same thing as with the exchange I created early on in my career called the Venture Capital Exchange before these angel networks took off. So you become a provider of information or a facilitator for information provider. You don't give any advice on whether or not they should invest. So each angel decides on each deal, each time, whether they want to invest or not. So therefore, there's no liability. You're a provider of information, or limited of any liability. And angels tend to like this a little more, at least active angels, as far as I can, the surveys that research I've done, because they then aren't committed to a fund which makes the decisions for them. Remember, as Tony indicated to you, most angels are ex-entrepreneurs. And you know, entrepreneurs are very free-spirited, individualistic people, and they feel they can make as good of an investment decision, or even better in most cases, than a fund manager or a group voting together as a group. So I really think if you're thinking about sending one up, you want to go the angel network route, not the angel fund route. And I think you're going to get a lot more interest by potential angels, as well as be a lot easier to get it through the university. Now, let's turn to the third point, and that is, how does a university benefit by creating an angel network for their startup ecosystem? Well, the next slide talks about the benefits of a university angel network. Number one, and this is one thing you really want to stress, it does provide education for students and faculty. For example, obviously, you're going to then be helping to position your students and faculty and their businesses in terms of how to present themselves best in front of an angel group. So they're going to learn about how to create a business plan, how to create a presentation strategy, because most angel groups only allow for maybe no more than 20 minutes of presentation. So they're really going to learn the value of business, what it means for ownership, what it means for dilution, and all those kinds of things. So it's a tremendous educational vehicle for both students and faculty. Number two, to get this more finite, it provides student training and experimental education. In the angel groups, angel network groups that I've set up at universities, the students actually do due diligence on the both on the when you evaluate the deals before you decide which ones are going to make the presentations, as well as the ones that are selected, they do the original due diligence and present in front of the angels. Now, I want to tell you, when I was a graduate student, or I've never used undergraduate students, I would have loved to have had that experience, to be able to present to a group of high net worth individuals and get the training with that. And I can assure you, the final question that almost, I can't remember a time it wasn't asked, is, well, what do you recommend we do? Do you recommend, would you, or they asked this way, would you invest in this company? So they really get training in valuation, which is very important, a very tough thing to teach. And they also get training in how to give a presentation to some significant people. Number three, it creates, develops, and funds the startups at the university. And Tony, I think, has done a great job in telling about that. You all know what that problem is, and that really helps in terms of that. Fourth, and I think this is a very important part that Tony talked about as well, the people in a university angel group tend to serve as mentors for these startups. And one of the things, even now, I'm asked to do a lot of mentoring for companies, and as I've started my own companies, and it's really important to have these mentors available. And because these angel groups are there for, university angel groups are there for more than just money making, although this is not a donation. Tony emphasized that, and I want to emphasize it again. They looked at this as an investment part of their portfolio, And again, as put on the previous slide, about 10% of their portfolio really should be in something like this, because even though the high risk is there, this is where all the great returns come from. So they really like mentoring students and faculty, and even outside angel investments that are done in the community. Four, and this is another point I think equally important to the first bullet, this for the university, this brings high net worth individuals to the university. The university, once if you're in development office, et cetera, and this is the way you chat with them about the value of this, it's very important for an individual to come to the university. Well, most individuals of this kind of ilk that could give significant dollars aren't going to come. So how do I bring them here? And this is one way to bring them there, because they're there for another purpose. And once they get familiar with the university, then familiarity helps lead to development investment as well. But remember, this dollars they invest have nothing to do with charitable giving. And that's important for the development office and for you to understand. They look at this in a different pool of money. This is an investment pool of money, not a donation pool of money. And finally, and equally important, I'd say this is the third most important bullet, you as a university now are assisting in economic development in the region. When I was in Boston, a couple of universities up there, one of the things I was very impressed with is the thinking of the MITs and the Harvards and the Boston colleges and the Boston universities, that they really owed they needed to contribute to the economic development of Boston. And it was so great that at one time when they have about 54% of the workforce in Boston, when I was there, two of the universities actually reneged on some of their tax structure that they didn't have to pay taxes on, and paid some taxes to help the city of Boston, and went that far. So you want to remember this. How do they do that? The next slide shows you one of the most important things that particularly legislatures always want to know is funding high growth companies. Everybody wants high growth companies, or what we call gazelles. So you can see that the number of employees in 1 year after investment are significant, 2 to 5, 6 to 10, et cetera. So from 20 on, in terms 20 downward, there's a significant amount of employment that you're contributing to the region, and that sings well with legislatures that you're in your area that you're doing with, as well as with the state, and of course nationally. It's very beneficial as well. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that and not only between high fund, high growth companies, look at the number of jobs created. And it's been known statistically, I'm not sure how much the statistics, and the validity of them, I'm sure they are significant. But this is where all the startup, this is where job creation is, not big companies. In fact, if you look at big companies after they grow for a while and then they start asymptotic in their sales, what do? They're cutting costs. And what's the easiest thing to cut? Jobs. So this is where job creation occurs in these small SMEs, startups. This is where the bulk of all jobs are created all over the world. That's why it's become so important in developing economies and economies outside the U.S. That they have this angel funding in place. And universities are in a position to create most of these startups because we have at our disposal technology out of the engineering and the medical and the dental and other professional schools, as well as technology from arts and sciences and the science part of the arts. And finally, if you look at the next slide, you'll see this job creation isn't just a one-time thing. Remember, the first slide talked about it in terms of right after startup. It continues to grow. And this is what we call the growth curve of companies. And of course, as Tony said, we all know that the decreasing number of firms always happens. That's what happens. And most firms won't survive the first 5 years, but those that do grow at a significant rate. And so they continue to add jobs in year 5, in year 6, in year 7. As they grow, they need employment. So the key to factor here is that we are impacting economic development, 1, by creating jobs, 2, by creating a tax base, and other things for the regions. And you're actually creating companies that are going to be, they tend to stay at home once the capital is available for them in the particular area they start in. So that's why the benefits of this University Angel Network. Now, how do you set one up? That's the fourth point that we want to talk about. So how do you set up a university-based angel network? And if we turn to the next slide, we'll see there's a couple of things that you want to think about. One is you need to find a champion at the university. Now, this champion is key to this whole setup process. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be the decision maker, and that's a different story. So when you think about it at your university, one of the key things you need to identify is who is going to approve this. And then that person has to be in this loop all the time and has to use those benefits we talked about to realize that this is a value to the university and there's no legal liability if I set up a university angel network, not an angel fund. And then you need to find, but that person is not going to champion it. Somebody has to champion it to get it all started and set up. This champion I've seen, it's like at the University Thunderbird Graduate School of Management. I was the champion. I was in the business school. At other universities, the champion is in the engineering school or comes out of the sciences. Or in one university, I know they set it up. The champion came from the tech transfer office. So, but you need to identify someone who has that desire and sees the benefit, and then can communicate that benefit in such a way that the angel network gets started. Number two, you got to recruit angels to the network. And now here's where it gets really, you got to be very, very careful. This is where your fundraising group or whatever it's called at your university, I've tried to think of what the new name is, but they have a much better name than that, gets a little concerned. They think that by you recruiting the people that may or may not contribute to the university, you're going to take away from their contributions. Remember, there's two pools of money. Everybody works this way that has any degree of financial capability. One pool is investing, one pool is donation, and these don't cross. The angels many angels still continue to donate the same amount or more money to the university and still invest in startup companies. And so you want to make sure, in my experience, that you have angels not only that are alumni, that's a wonderful group and you want to definitely do that, but you also want to have angels that are not alumni. And this means bringing new people, remember that benefit I talked about, to the university that have the capability of being donators. So you're not competing against the development office, you're helping the development office. And that's the kind of attitude and kind of talk you want to make sure everybody understands. And then three, you got to set up your typical meeting schedule. Now this varies all over the place. Some angel groups meet for 3 hours in an afternoon. This means that most of those angel groups are probably not working individuals. They tend to use this as a social network as well more, and they maybe meet 4 times a year. One group I know only meets 4 times a year and only sees 2 deals in that time. So they have a big lunch, they socialize, and then they get down to business. That to me is not a very effective angel group, but anyway, it's what happens. That angel group actually has 120 people in their network, and that now 120 show up at every meeting, but that's the way they operate. The next slide shows you the kind of angel network meeting I like. So, and this is what you can do very, very effectively at the university, because the first 30 minutes is education. Now, the angels can or cannot come to that. The actual presentation part starts down at point 4, but you can talk about some things you're interested in. Like, for example, they may want to have, one time with this one angel group I was working with, we had a person come in and talk about how do you make sure that check out the person and the key people in the company. And she was running her own agency on that and gave a nice presentation. Another one wanted to know, well, what's going on in terms of the learning culture. So a professor from the university gave that. So you have access to a really brilliant people at the university that I really like that as an enticer to get people to come. Then usually, at least in the groups I've set up, they're always in the evening. So that may start at 5 o'clock. 5:30 is dinner and drinks. It's only 45 minutes. You maybe about an hour. So beverages, and usually it's always cash bar, so you don't have to come up with that cost. You can provide the dinner. You might want to charge people for a year $1,000. This is nothing compared to these to the wealth of these individuals. Remember Tony's slide at the beginning, and then the real work comes in. So let's say you start at 4:30, then 5 to 6 is that. Then you have your company presentations. I think you should limit the company presentations, part of it, down to 20 minutes, and then you have your student team, if you want to use those, give their 3-minute presentations. You then have Q&A from the angel investors that are present, and then switch to the next company. And you really keep this very tight schedule, because I've learned in working with angel groups, these angels want to leave by 9 o'clock. I mean, they're very driven people, and they want to leave the event by 9 o'clock. And so after the company presentations, you would then have a vote on the companies and that they want to move forward with. And if 3 are not a vote by the whole group, but you'd say how many of you are interested in this company. If 1 or more want to do that, then you form a team. Those teams start the due diligence process. If there isn't anyone, then they aren't. And you hopefully, I really strongly encourage you to get a feedback system where everybody fills out a form in every company, so you can give that back to the company. This creates your deal flow, and that's a real trick that I learned, that you create deal flow, because you got to have good deal flow to have good deals to present. So that's a typical angel meeting, but you can do all kinds of things. And but most of them don't meet in the summer, and so the ones I've set up, we meet 8 times a year, once a month, except over Christmas holidays. Everybody goes brain dead during that time. So and we had another 3 months of a year. So you have 4 months you don't meet, so you meet 8 times a year. So how can NCE2 help you set up your own angel network? And Tony and I have been thinking about this quite a while. And on the next slide, you'll see what we propose to help you with it if you have interest. One is we really assist in setting up a university angel network. We help you identify the champion. We help you, the university who needs to give its blessing, the person or persons at that level understand why this is important for the university and what the benefits they receive. And so we become the advocate in that sense for the university angel network. Number 2, we assist in recruiting angels into the network. Not only you have your local angels, which are extremely important, you have to have your base, but there's also in the demo day that was talked about by RIA, they have angels that also are interested in local groups. So we can add those angels to you as well, but show you how to recruit them, what to say, and those kinds of things. Number 3, we assist in establishing the deal flow and the evaluation process. In a typical good angel network, let's say you meet 6 times a year, you may get from 80 to 100 deals, and you have to evaluate them and bring that down to maybe 4 that's going to be presented, or if you're on the 2 deal mode, which I think is too small, you do that. So we help and show you how to evaluate, how to get the deal flow, and those kinds of things. Some groups I like, we do a 2-stage deal flow process. Other groups do a 1-stage deal flow evaluation process. That's entirely up to you. We work with you on doing that. We assist in developing the marketing materials you're going to need. Assist in developing a mentor program, and that's really key. Tony indicated that in one of his slides, and I want to share with you, that's what university angel groups do, particularly for those groups, those deal flows that come in through the university. You also want to make sure you are open to deal flows in your region. In fact, the one I established, we actually look for deal flows all over the world, but our angels are much more globally oriented. That's very rare. Most angels like to invest within a 1 day's travel so they can work with the group, et cetera, et cetera. But they that was just a very unusual situation. So we're also going to provide you with materials, deal screening materials, the business plan format you need to use. And also I have developed a computer mentoring program. It's very easy to set up and execute. So we will leave you that program so you can actually have an easy time in setting up this mentoring program. And the final thing, which is really nice, that Tony was able to establish this $1 billion American Chinese University Growth Fund, $1 billion that was mentioned before, and they're interested in having about 10% of that fund co-invest with the angel fundings that go on in our University Angel Network. So that is another nice benefit that comes out of this. So that's what we can do for you in terms of NCET2, and I think we're open to any questions you might have, and hopefully you'll be interested in at least moving forward with or without us and setting up your own angel network.
All right, thank you, Bob, and thanks, Tony. So if you would like more information or follow-up information about setting up your own University Angel Group, just contact me at riaancheta@ncet2.org. I think I also put in that email address in the chat box, so you can just copy and paste it and send me an email if you'd like to do a follow-up call following this presentation. All right, so we can start now with the Q&A. So let's see. Tony, are you still around?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I want to be sure before we start the Q&A. All right, so we have a few questions lined up, pretty good questions. So let's start with the first one over here. Okay. How do you work with the development office in establishing the Angel Group?
Well, I'll start off that question. Tony, add whatever you want. This, to me, is the most sensitive part of this whole process, because for some reason, this development office or fundraising office, or sometimes it combined with alumni office, feel very territorial about particularly alumni. That's why, one, you need to make it very clear to them of these two pockets of money. Now, they won't believe that, but I guarantee you that is exactly what happens. Investment money versus donation money. But two, the way you do make sure they understand this is you recruit people other than present people donating to the university. So you have alumni and non-alumni, and alumni that aren't donating, you're actually helping them to get them interested in the university by bringing them regularly to the university to look for investment situations. I think most savvy alumni development office people understand that if I can get them here, that's one start in the equation. So that needs to be done. And number three, you want to try to create a partnership and harmonious relationship with them, so that they understand you're working with them for the good of the university. Because you remember also, they should understand that if you create startups out of the university, what happens? Those people get more loyal to the university. So if they really are thinking long term, 5 years from today, that company could cash out. I want to tell you, the easiest money I've ever raised for my centers or anything else I've created at different universities is people who just cashed out. I love those people. So, they have to look at this in terms of a much broader length of time and a much bigger picture than they tend to think about.
Yeah, let me say a few words. So when I was at George Washington University, we had somebody that was really good in the development office that was very engaged in our angel group. And what he found actually was that it was very easy to find people that were entrepreneurs and wealthy people to engage with the university. Sometimes, they had lists of people that are high net worth, but don't respond to calls and emails and mailings and all kinds of things. And what this person found was, when he tried to reach some of those people and talk about the angel group or talk about entrepreneurship, they got responses, right? That was a hook into this elusive group of people. So you might want to talk to your development office about that, and even start with the ones that they have a hard time getting return calls from.
All right, our next question: how do I recruit angels to the network? Bob, Tony?
Well, since I'm in the starting off, I'll start off this one too. It's really not as difficult as you might think. And I hope you understand that if you go the network route, which we highly recommend, people come for various reasons. Now, the networks I set up, I do not have a requirement for any investment. I know in one group I set up at another university. There was this one angel that he came for, I think it was his second year before he decided to invest in any of our deal flows. And I asked him, I said, after a while before he made that investment, I said, John, why are you coming? He said, oh, it's a great social event. I get to meet my colleagues. I get to have a beverage. I get to have some dinner. And I get to see what's happening in terms of the technology. He said, it's fascinating to me. And he said, I just haven't found any yet that I feel comfortable with. But once I do, I will invest. And again, shortly thereafter, I think it was not the next meeting, but the meeting after, he did do an investment. So you want to make sure that the word gets out that you have an angel network group that's going to see very high quality deals, both in the university and outside the university for the region, because some of these are going to be more interested in economic development than what happens in the university for the region they're in, and that this is going to be an event where they're going to be educated if you do the education thing, which universities can do the best, and that they're going to have a nice social time, and they're going to see the state of the art of technology, and they make individual investment decisions on a deal by deal basis.
Yeah, I don't think I need to add too much more to that. I think that was a really great response. I'll just say, though, if you look around, you already have these people going through your halls. They're usually hanging out, cash entrepreneurs, that went around the world, played golf for a while, and now are pretty bored, especially ones in their 40s and 50s. They've made their money, so they're not going to work again for anybody, and probably aren't going to create another startup themselves, but want to stay engaged. And a lot of times, what we found at GW is they ended up at the university trying to work with students or to work with researchers, or just, as Bob said, stay in the game. So they're in your hallways already. Start with them, and then if you want to do something a little more formal, there's mailings and other ideas, marketing ideas that Bob has that he can share with you.
All right, thank you, Tony. Thank you, Bob. Our next question is, do universities typically contribute financially to the operational costs of university angel networks?
This, I guess we'll keep the order. It seems to work so far. My only, when I set these up at universities and the ones I had, I really don't ask the university to do anything but provide space and not charge me for space. So, for example, let's go back to Jumpstart. When we started Jumpstart, which was an angel fund, but it's the same principle. The person who managed the Jumpstart fund when it started, her office was right across from mine at the university. So, and we weren't billed or any extra outside overhead space or cost of space. The salaries should be, if you do a fund, and that's another reason why you don't do a fund, that was paid for by the fund. So we had a certain allocation and overhead of the fund costs that we had to go for running the fund. But when you do a network, the only thing I would ask the university to do would, again, to contribute space without charging you. Not so much you don't have a person now managing it, or you could have in terms of them, but more importantly to, when you have your meetings, that space is free. You want to charge the angels. Again, this is not, remember, the people you're dealing with, their salaries or their financial worth. For them, $1,000, $1,500 a year is really nothing, particularly when you're providing a dinner every time you meet. I would always have a cash bar. I surely wouldn't get into funding that. That helps you fund some student help. You could actually run this with one person and students, and allows you to operate without any trouble. And actually, in most cases, every university network I've ever set up, we've actually had a net profit at the end of the year, which we didn't report, of course, but we kept that and built up our own fund. Not much, but had our own capital that we can do things with.
Yeah, I'll just add that angel groups generally are not very expensive. their budgets are usually, could be $25,000–$50,000. And as long as you don't have to pay for a full-time manager, it's pretty easy to do it with the membership fees or whatever fees you want to get from the angels. So $1,500 is pretty common. So if you have 50, it kind of works out pretty easily. And the managers, when it's done through a university, is usually already on staff. So the outside traditional groups usually have a bigger problem, which is how do they fund operations for a manager. But at the university, since that cost could be usually absorbed by the ongoing staff and champion, that's usually not a problem. And as Bob said, you probably run a little bit of a profit, and definitely you're going to be able to fund some student activity here with some of the money. The other, so there's two main funding sources. One is the angel membership fees, and the other is sponsors. And a lot of law firms, if you bring them in to do some presentations or be involved with the startups, usually will also contribute some money to operating costs.
Yeah, that's a good point, Tony. I didn't mention that, but I think a good angel network, university angel network, actually, startup companies need to contribute something to make a if they're chosen to make a presentation. So that's another decision you have to make for your own university angel network.
All right. Next question. I think we have time for a couple more. Where should we locate the angel network in the university?
Well, since we're keeping this order, I think that's really university dependent. I think it varies significantly. I've seen them located in the College of Business. That makes some sense, since most of the people that are going to be angels probably have started their own companies, as Tony said. I've seen them located in the tech transfer area. That's probably the least location. And I've seen them located in the engineering school and or in the the hard sciences, particularly if you have some kind of programs that link entrepreneurship and technology, both are either engineering or technology, like mathematics, statistics, biology, chemistry, and physics. Then they may be located there. So that's university dependent more than anything else.
Yeah, I agree. I think the main thing is what Bob mentioned before. You need to find the champion. So wherever that champion is, that's where it should be located. We did it out of the School of Engineering. It could be done at a business school. It could be done at basically any office. But you just have to find somebody who cares.
All right. I think we have time for one more question. How do we ensure that angels get good deal flow, and how do we screen deals?
No, I think this is an important thing, and this ties in with what Tony said in terms of this gap funding, particularly when the deals come out of the university. And the champion or whoever is working on this with them really have to proactively get deals from the university. This is not something that most scientists or engineers think about. They're mostly interested in research and furthering that research, et cetera. So this is some work to get your deal flow going. Once you get established and then you get listed, like the Kauffman Foundation lists all angel group networks all over the country. ACA is a membership organization, so you got to join. Kauffman is not. You just send in your information to become on their network. You'll be amazed at how quickly deals come in from sources you've never thought about, because money is the key to starting up your company. And I know at several angel networks I've formed at universities, we would have, in fact, we would have them fly in from all over the country if they felt that our angel group was really interested in investing in their particular area. Some angel groups are very focused in their investment, just like venture capitalists. So they may only specify 2, 3, or 4 industries they're interested in. Most angel groups that I've been involved with, they were much more broader than that. And again, in one angel group, we even invested several times in international situations, but that's very, very unusual. So you really have to get the deal flow in terms of not only internally in the university, which is a big focus, but in the region, and then you're going to pick up the deal flow from other angels. You're also going to get deal flow from other angel groups. Remember, we met, Tony and I both mentioned the fact that we have angels from the Demo Day network, but other angel groups in your area are going to want you to co-invest. And this is really nice. You need a lead invest in the angel group and another invest in angel group. The screening of deals is very, I don't want to go into that in detail, but there's criteria you use, and it depends on what you want to do. And it's not as difficult as it may seem. And then, but the big thing is, you want to do a one-stage screening process. I really prefer a two-stage screening process. And I think by doing that, you get a better deals in front of the angels that you have coming in your network.
Yeah, and I'll just add this. One thing we didn't really talk about here because we didn't have the time, but once you start finding your angels, especially if you have like a group of 20 to 25, some of those people will step up and take leadership roles, and they'll start, doing some of the screening and making sure the deals, that come in are appropriately processed. Because at the end of the day, you got to remember this is not a donation, and you have to have good deals. So you can't just fund, a famous professor who wants to create a startup and just wants the money from the angel group. Yeah, because that's not going to work, right? This is not money for that. So you have to bear in mind, you have to have good deal flow, but I would suggest you actually step away from that part of it and let the members help you. And some of them will be very passive, but there will be some that will just kind of want to be in the middle of the deal flow and help you screen and bring in deals and syndicate and do the rest. You'll probably find like 10-15% of your membership will kind of step up and do some of that operational piece. So the university doesn't need to do really much there, especially lead. And then if you do anything, you just have the students take direction and do some of the administrative work for those lead angels that you'll find just come up.
All right, so I guess that's all the time we have today for this webinar and for the questions. Again, if you have additional questions, or if you'd like to contact us for follow-up information or do a follow-up call, just email me at riaandcheta@ncet2.org, and I'll set up a call with you for to talk to Tony and Bob about greater, more detailed information about forming an angel group in your university. So again, I'd like to thank Tony and thank you, Bob, for presenting this afternoon. Do you have any final words before we wrap up?
I do not.
Yep, and I just want to thank everybody. Bob, thank you. Ria, thank you, and all people attending. So if you have any questions or follow-up, just don't hesitate. Looking forward to hearing from you and seeing you create some angel groups around your university. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you, and have a good afternoon.